Hi everybody, welcome to chapter 16 in our Glickman, Gordon, and Ross Gordon textbook. This chapter is going to look at group development, but I'm going to put a slightly different spin on it. I think this chapter really goes over this notion of conflict resolution in ways that we can use groups so that people can get along. I've taught this a number of times in a business school. So the approach that I'm going to take is not the approach that's presented in Glickman. I'm going to give you this from a different frame because I want you to think about it from a business perspective. I think that will open your eyes up a little bit more to different ways that you can look at conflict and ways that you can look at resolving conflict. So I've integrated some of the things that I taught in my undergraduate business courses into the chapter. So there is a 5-stage model to grouping. It's 2 or more individuals that interact with each other, and it can be formal or it can be informal. The 5 different stages are forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Obviously that's pretty, it might be a cheesy way to look at it, but that's also the way that it's kind of been presented. It's stages that teams work and stages that groups work. Forming is when people determine the purpose of the group and why the group exists. Members determine where they fit, what types of behavior are acceptable. Can it be more informal? Can it be formal? And once the group recognizes themselves as a group and they see themselves as a group of people working together, then this stage is complete. Storming is when control is determined within the group. Somebody inevitably in any group interaction will emerge as the leader. And I believe that, and I hesitate to see any time that doesn't occur. People can leave the group at this time, or conflict happens. And when conflict happens, it's how you resolve it that matters. So norming is when people have relationships within the group. This is when maybe not your power struggles begin, but people form power-based relationships. The idea is to have, a certain identity with the group so that there's a clear identity on the people that are part of it and there is a clear mission. So, performing. This is when the group is fully functional and accepted. Everybody knows their role, they know their position, everybody knows each other, so now the actual performance is what happens. This is where most of the time should be done in any of your group work, and if you're looking at professional learning communities, of course, most of the work is going to be done at this position. Eventually, groups will break up and go their separate ways. Some people will continue to work on specific tasks, and others will go about and do something completely different. So, within groups, everybody has roles, and if The Rock would tell you, he would say, know your role and shut your mouth. But these are the patterns and these are the behaviors that somebody is responsible for within their group. Every single person will eventually have a role. Some person is going to be your no-no in the group. We can't do this because they're going to be your naysayer. Somebody's going to be the optimistic person that always pushes things forward. And in education, in professional learning communities, you're going to see that in group work this happens quite more frequently than you expect. The role identity is what somebody that's in a specific role is supposed to do. It's how they're supposed to act. The leader's supposed to present themselves in a particular way and hold themselves to a particular standard. The perception is how everybody believes that somebody is supposed to act in their particular role. Expectations is what others think you should be doing in your role. And conflict is when people have conflict with each other. So, people tend to conform and change their attitudes and behaviors to what the group expects. People have said that conformity has steadily declined. I see that good old boys networks still exist within almost every single system that you work in, and there are different ways that those are interpreted and are used. And in a face-to-face class, I would always ask you for your opinions. But think about, are we in a position where people naturally conform to the main roles that the organization is presenting? So, deviant workplace behavior. People will naturally do things that violate norms that cause an organization to be negative. I always relate to Office Space, which I've begged you, go watch Office Space, but this notion that, make sure everybody gets a piece this time. That has an impact on how you feel about the organization. If the organization's not being fair to you, you're going to be more likely to act deviant to the workplace. What does deviant workplace behavior look like? Well, it could be somebody that simply, steals a red stapler, somebody that borrows a pencil, somebody that takes whiteboard markers home with them. That's a potential consideration. Group size does matter, and it makes a difference. In most research, it depends on what's getting done and the topic that's at hand, but they say for professional learning communities, try to keep your members at somewhere like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 members. You don't want there to be too many voices, but you want there to be enough voices where every voice can be heard. If there's lots of tasks that need to be done and lots of things that need to be done, you want larger groups. If there's not, the smaller the group, the probably more effective it's going to be. Social loafing must be addressed because we have times when people are supposed to be working when they're basically just going to chill and talk to each other and work on ways where they can get along. I don't think that you can talk about group work without realizing that social loafing does exist and people are naturally going to do it within any roles that they have within an organization. It can be good, though, if the social loafing actually can enhance your productivity because people get along and they get to know each other better. So a professional learning community person would tell you that there's a time and a place for this, and it's certainly okay. But if it starts to reduce the efficiency in the group and their capabilities, that's when it becomes more of a problem. So cohesion within groups is a big idea, and there's always cohesion between school districts and principals and central administrators, and really this idea of principal level cohesion is a big idea in our school system. How much cohesion do the building principals have with each other, and how do they use that in conjunction with the other principals and other administrators to ensure that there's a common goal being accomplished? In order to have people that are on the same page, you should do small groups. I think for building principals, a lot of this can be seen when you do your community-based elementary schools, but the elementary school principals are working together, but they're only working with other elementary school principals. You want them to spend time together and get along, and you want to give them group rewards rather than individual rewards, because that makes people think in a group that, that the group has accomplished something and not them. Groupthink can be good. Every time that you hear the word groupthink, people normally use it in negative terms, but I think that there are positives to groupthink. If all members in a group can think alike and make the same decisions, that can be a positive if they're the decisions you as the leader want the organization to make. But if they're all thinking alike and they're not offering new innovative ideas to teaching practices, to student improvement, that can be a problem. One of the other challenges that happens is somebody can be the outcast in the group. And if they're the outcast in the group, they feel that expressing their opinion isn't going to work, then they're going to step back and they're not going to express their opinion. So most of the time, interacting groups are where these group decision-making decisions take place. It doesn't have to be face-to-face. It can be done with technology. But the problem with technology is there's a lot of difficulty with communication. Think about this in the course of the class we're taking right now. I always feel like I have to prod if I'm teaching from one location to the other. Right now, you're watching a video of me. You can't interact with me. You can't give me your opinions on this stuff. You just basically have to sit here and watch it. Maybe in the discussion board you'll give me your opinion. But I'm presenting this to you and I'm not having a two-way line of communication. And that's one of the challenges with internet and computerized communications. So people care about teams because teams can motivate others and there's competition to do better. And if you believe in your school district as a team of people working together that is looking to generally improve schools, well, this notion of teaming is something that's going to come up in any of the work that you do, especially in professional learning communities. So work groups are people that just make decisions to help each other. Work teams are people that are trying to get a larger level of performance that is better than each one of them doing things individually. The whole purpose of the professional learning community, and why we're even mentioning teaming in this class and covering this chapter, is this idea of the group is greater than people that are individual. Because in a professional learning community, every single input should be used to not only improve one teacher's instruction, but their input should be used to improve the next person's instruction and the next person's instruction. And as a supervisor, you can implement that in professional learning communities. So 4 types of teams. We'll go over these very briefly. I think these are all self-explanatory. Your problem-solving teams, they get together just to try to accomplish a goal and accomplish a task. They share ideas with each other. They offer different ways that things can be done and accomplished. But ultimately, the decision still lies in the hand of the supervisor, of the building principal, of the superintendent. But they make a decision, and the supervisor gets to analyze it. Self-managed work teams means we give complete autonomy. We let them do their own work. We let them evaluate their other performances, and everybody seems to have an equal say. I caution with this model because, truthfully, can everybody have an equal say? When you have cross-functional teams, people are from the same level, but they are within different areas of the organization. They can develop new ideas and solve problems. They can coordinate projects together, but the development can take time for people to get to know each other because they're working across different boundaries and working across different departments. The example that I would use in a doctoral school reform class for cross-functional teams is the unfortunate situation that we run into when we do professional learning communities and we stick the art teachers and the music teachers and the phys ed teachers and the home ec teachers all together and say, here, learn, here's your professional learning community. It's so much easier to stick together all the second grade teachers, all the third grade teachers, all the science teachers, all the social studies teachers. But when you stick the unified arts teachers in one system, it's going to be difficult for them to exchange information, get to know each other, and develop things that can be beneficial for the entire organization. So we argue that virtual teams can overcome time and space, but I question that. I mean, there's so much to be said about face-to-face interaction, but it's certainly something that can be done. So the next part of this chapter starts to engage with internal employee relations. And in supervision, we're doing a supervision course. You have to realize that you're going to face disciplinary action. We've presented models of supervision and we've presented models for conferences. In our ideal world, if we were looking at this where every teacher was performing and doing their job properly, we wouldn't have to engage in disciplinary actions. Unfortunately, this is not an ideal world, and there's going to be people that are going to be in direct defiance of us. We're going to try to conference with them, and nothing's going to work. This is when we actually look at different ways that we can use internal employee relations in order to influence what they're doing and what that looks like. So, discipline is the employee's own control over what they're supposed to be doing. Disciplinary action is when you as the supervisor take action against your teacher because they failed to do what you asked them to do. So if in that conferencing that took place earlier, you asked the teacher to improve and do 1, 2, or 3 things a little bit differently and present a time frame for them to do it and they don't do it, you can invoke disciplinary action upon them. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly acceptable. So, give you a little bit of historical background on what discipline means. Discipline actually means to teach. So it should be done to make people learn. And I think it's a worst case scenario model because with our teachers, if we've already conferenced with them and we've given them some directives, if they haven't done it, they haven't listened to our orders in the first place, then they should learn that we're serious and we're actually going to invoke some sort of punishment on them. So there are 3 different types of disciplinary action, and we're going to go over each one of these briefly. The hot stove rule is basically everything is set aside, and if you touch the hot stove, you're going to burn no matter what. The punishment in this model is consistent. It's impersonal, but it's consistent. The issue that runs in with that is all problems and all situations are not the same. For instance, if you're punishing a teacher that shows up late to work because they have a sick mother or sick child, is that different than somebody who's showing up to work late because they were out drinking and partying the night before? Under the hot stove rule, it wouldn't matter what the reason is. The fact would be you just gave them a punishment no matter what. So progressive disciplinary action was something that the NLRA Act of 1935 suggested that you do, and this is what most organizations do. You simply move up the chain as more offenses occur, and you document that you've been progressive in the disciplinary action that you've done. You also have this notion of disciplinary action without punishment, and this is what I call the Walmart model of punishment. What Walmart will do is they'll give somebody time off with pay, and they'll say, you can think about what you did. Take a few days, decide what, if you want to come back here, and if you can follow the rules appropriately. Once they think about it, if they do it again, they're immediately fired. So you've not given them punishment, you've given them time to think about it, but then you've also given them an ultimatum. Think about what you did. If you can come back and you can't do this, then we need to move on and you need to find a different occupation. The key with this, though, is if there are specific rules, those rules need to be stated in writing so that everybody truly understands them. It wouldn't be discipline if we didn't have grievances. So if you have a labor agreement, which obviously we don't in this state, but there should be some form of procedure related to grievances. These are normally easy to follow and well-defined, but normally they're there and they outline anything potentially that an employee could do. Most of your teacher union contracts, and you don't see these this level in Oklahoma because they're an agreement, but the contracts that most school districts have are between 100 and 120 pages. So the grievance procedures are clearly outlined and people know what they did wrong or what they were supposed to do. So grievances should be adjusted slowly. Grievances should be adjusted promptly. I read that wrong. If there's a problem, you need to make sure that it's done in a certain amount of time and people understand it. And it has to be timely when possible. So what are written warnings? In an appropriate written warning, I'll present one for you on here because I think this is a good example of one. You give the person a date. You make sure they know who it's to, and you tell them in the subject that it is a written warning. You give an exact example of what happened. In this case, this individual was 30 minutes late to work, and they offered no justification for it. They had done it before, and they didn't get a written warning that time, but this is the second time that they've done it. So you've used it progressively, and you've shown that it's there. The key thing here is this notion that signing the form says that you don't agree with it, but you at least acknowledge that it exists. Most large and medium-sized non-union firms have established formal grievance procedures. How they resolve their complaints vary, but there's something that's in place where they can at least talk to a supervisor, go to the superintendent, go to the school board if it's something serious, and handle it there. Occasionally, and we've talked about this in this course a lot, you can transfer somebody. If you have a teacher that you can't get rid of that's there for a permanent position and they're going to be there forever, you can simply transfer them within the organization. It doesn't mean they're promoted or demoted, you're simply moving them around. You can do this to avoid personality classes, to satisfy people's desires, to give them promotions if they necessarily weren't available. For instance, if you're in an elementary school where there's potentially 5 or 6 people that want to be a principal, you can use this as a way to promote somebody that might not automatically have gotten promoted. So that's it. I only have 2 more chapters in Glickman to cover. One is on professional development, and the other one is on action research. Professional development will be kind of a quick overview of how you can use supervision in professional development and ensure that it's working. We cover that a lot in the leadership theory class, which you already know. And then the action research is a big idea that's big in our doc program that we look at a lot. If there's anything else I can do to help, please let me know, but I hope you got something out of this chapter. Thank you.